Tonight's dinner will take you 20 minutes, and you'll barely have to chew it. 2 million years ago, that same 20 minutes could get you killed. Every extra hour spent grinding down raw meat and bitter roots was another hour exposed in the dark, with nothing standing between you and whatever was moving just outside the light. 30 meters underground, in total darkness, researchers found proof that something eventually changed that equation. Ash that's roughly 1 million years old. Alongside it, burnt bone fragments, charred plant remains, sitting undisturbed in a cave in South Africa. Lightning doesn't reach 30 meters underground. Wildfires don't wander into cave systems and quietly burn in one spot. Someone carried fire in there on purpose, fed it, and used it 1 million years before a single word was ever written. That alone is strange. Here's what makes it stranger. Fossils from hundreds of thousands of years earlier already show bodies with smaller guts, smaller teeth, and weaker jaws, changes that biologically are only supposed to happen once a species starts eating food that's been cooked. The body may have started changing before we have anything close to proof that humans could reliably make fire at all. So how did ancient humans actually invent cooking, and why doesn't the evidence add up? To understand why that gap matters, you have to picture what raw food actually costs a body. 2 million years ago, in Africa, your ancestors spent most of their waking hours doing one thing: chewing. Tough raw meat. Bitter wild roots. Every calorie fought for with the jaw, the same brutal chewing marathon chimpanzees still do today, up to 6 hours a day just to survive. And yet the body you're running on doesn't look built for that fight. Human guts are short. Human jaws are weak, nowhere near the ridged, muscle-anchored skulls gorillas and chimps carry for grinding raw fiber all day long. By almost every measure that matters for eating things raw, we're among the worst-equipped great apes alive. Somehow, that same weak, poorly equipped body also runs the biggest brain, relative to size, of any species that's ever walked the earth, an organ that alone burns through roughly 20% of your entire daily energy budget, doing nothing but think. A digestive system this weak should not be able to fund an organ this expensive. Unless something changed the math a very long time ago. Around 1.9 million years ago, a new species shows up in the fossil record: Homo erectus. Compared to everything before it, Homo erectus had a smaller gut, smaller teeth, weaker jaw muscles, and a brain that jumped in size by nearly 40% almost overnight, on an evolutionary timescale. Practically the exact upgrade you'd expect if cooking had just entered the picture. One anthropologist, Richard Wrangham, built an entire theory around this. Cooking, not meat, not tools, not walking upright, was the single event that turned an ape into a human. Cooked food is easier to chew, easier to digest, and delivers dramatically more usable calories than the same food raw, freeing up energy that evolution could pour straight into the brain. There's just one problem, and it's the same one we opened with. Homo erectus shows up 1.9 million years ago. Rock-solid, undeniable evidence of controlled fire doesn't show up in the archaeological record until hundreds of thousands of years later. For a long stretch of prehistory, we have the body cooking should have built without solid proof of the fire that supposedly built it. Either the evidence hasn't been found yet, buried in sites nobody's excavated, or the truth is messier than one clean invention. Maybe a small band in one valley kept a flame alive for a few generations, then lost it during a hard winter. And the trick had to be rediscovered somewhere else entirely, centuries later. Cooking wasn't a single light bulb moment. It was scattered and inconsistent, happening in some places and not others, for hundreds of thousands of years before it finally stuck for good. The clearest answer so far comes from a site in Israel called Gesher Beno Yaakov, where archaeologists found burned flint, charred wood, and scorched seeds clustered in the same small spots, over and over, in layers dated to roughly 790,000 years ago. Fires that weren't just started once. Fires that were maintained. In the same locations, again and again, the signature of a group that had learned to keep a flame alive and carry it with them from camp to camp. Go forward a few 100,000 years to a cave in Israel called Kesem, and the evidence gets even more specific. A massive hearth sits at the center of the cave, surrounded by burnt animal bones covered in cut marks, clear proof that meat wasn't just roasted, it was deliberately sliced, cooked, and very likely shared among the group gathered around that fire. So maybe the body changed first, in small steps, wherever fire was rare and irregular. And then, once fire became something a group could reliably keep alive night after night, cooking stopped being a lucky accident and became a daily habit that never went away again. Either way, the pattern holds. Wherever humans figured out how to control fire, cooked food followed almost immediately. And it wasn't just our direct ancestors. When researchers examined the hardened plaques scraped off Neanderthal teeth found in caves in Iraq and Belgium, they found tiny starch granules trapped inside grains from plants like barley and wild root vegetables. Under a microscope, those granules weren't smooth and intact, the way raw starch looks. They were swollen, cracked, and warped, exactly the kind of damage that only happens when starch is heated. Neanderthals, a completely separate branch of the human family tree, living in caves thousands of kilometers apart from each other, were independently cooking their food too. Which raises an odd question. If two different human species, on two different evolutionary paths, both landed on the exact same trick-tame fire, cook food, reshape the body around it, was this really an invention at all? Or was cooking less like something humans discovered, and more like something evolution was always going to stumble into? The moment any big-brained ape figured out how to keep a flame alive. But cooking didn't just change what was happening inside the human body. It changed what happened after dark. You cannot cook food the moment you catch it. Meat has to be carried back, prepared, and held over a fire long enough to actually cook, which meant humans had to start doing something almost no other animal does. Gathering in one place, sitting still together, doing nothing productive except talking, for hours, every single night. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer communities in the Kalahari found something telling. During the day, conversations around camp were mostly practical complaints, gossip, arguments over food and work. But once the fire was lit and the meal was cooking, the same people shifted almost entirely to a different kind of talk: stories. Myths, histories passed down from grandparents. Jokes that made the whole circle laugh. The kind of conversation that builds a shared culture, not just a shared meal. Cooking fires didn't just feed the body. They created the very first stage humans ever had a nightly gathering with nothing to do but talk, remember, and pass on what the tribe knew. Long before anyone invented writing, the campfire was already doing the job of a library. Strangely, the fire itself was the easy part. Roasting meat over a flame just needs a fire and something to hold the food near it. Boiling is a different problem entirely. You need a container that can hold water and survive direct heat, and for most of human history, nothing like that existed. For tens of thousands of years, the only way to boil anything was to heat stones in a fire until they glowed, then drop them one at a time into a leather pouch or a skin-lined pit until the water inside finally started to bubble. Real boiling, in actual pottery, over an open flame, didn't become common until roughly 20,000 years ago, meaning humans were expert fire cooks for the better part of 1,000,000 years before we ever figured out how to properly boil a pot of water. Every time you casually flip on a stove today, you're running the final step of an upgrade that started with an exhausted ape. Chewing raw roots for 6 hours a day, somewhere in Africa, 2 million years ago. That ape didn't get a bigger brain and then discover fire. The fire came first. The brain was the reward. And every single person alive today is descended from someone who kept that fire from going out even on the nights when it would have been so much easier to just let it.